I moved away after he left me for his secretary. At their lavish wedding, my uncle accidentally revealed who I really am. He instantly regretted everything. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The heavy glass door of the Golden Oak swung open, and the familiar scent of roasted prime rib and aged leather hit me. It used to be the smell of celebration, of anniversaries, of love. Tonight, it smelled like an ending. I walked to the corner table, the secluded one near the fireplace where Curtis had proposed to me exactly 8 years ago. I had reserved it specifically for this night, for our final dinner before the divorce papers were signed tomorrow morning. I wanted closure. I wanted to look the man I had dedicated my 20s to in the eye and say goodbye with dignity. But dignity seemed to be the last thing on Curtis's mind. He arrived 20 minutes late. He didn't rush. He didn't look apologetic. He strolled in, wearing the Italian silk suit I had saved up for 6 months to buy him for his birthday last year. He looked successful, polished, and completely indifferent to my presence. He pulled out the chair and sat down without a greeting, his eyes glued to his smartphone. His thumbs moved rapidly across the screen, a small smirk playing on his lips. I knew exactly who was on the other end of those messages. Tiffany. His 24-year-old secretary. The one who called him daddy in the office when she thought no one was listening. I ordered the Cabernet you like, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to sound strong. And the filet mignon, medium rare. Curtis finally looked up, but his eyes didn't meet mine. They scanned the room, checking to see if anyone important was watching him. Yeah, fine, he muttered, picking up the wineglass and taking a swig like it was water. Let's make this quick, Wendy. I have plans later. Plans with her? I asked, cutting straight to the chase. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. With Tiffany. Yes. We're planning the wedding. She wants a winter theme. It's going to be spectacular, much bigger than that backyard barbecue we had when we got married. His words were like small, precise daggers. Our wedding had been small because we were broke. Because I had insisted we put every penny into his startup capital. We were building a future, Curtis. That backyard barbecue was all we could afford because I was paying your office rent. And look where that got me, he sneered, finally locking eyes with me. There was no warmth left in them, only a cold, hard arrogance. I'm a CEO now, Wendy. I need a woman who matches that energy. Tiffany, she's vibrant. She knows what she wants. She knows how to make a man feel like a king. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a cruel whisper. You're just tired. You smell like old cooking oil and laundry detergent. You remind me of the struggle, and frankly, I'm done struggling. I gripped the linen napkin in my lap so hard my knuckles turned white. 8 years. I had worked double shifts at a diner and took freelance data entry jobs at night so he wouldn't have to worry about bills while building his company. I had cooked, cleaned, ironed his shirts, and soothed his ego when clients rejected him. And now, I was just a reminder of the struggle. I gave you everything, Curtis, I whispered. I gave up my design degree for you. And that was your choice, he shrugged, checking his watch. Don't play the victim. You didn't have the drive anyway. Tiffany, she has drive. She's helping me rebrand the entire company image. She's the future. Your history. The waiter arrived with the steaks, sizzling on hot plates. The aroma that once made my mouth water now made my stomach turn. Curtis picked up his knife and fork and started eating with gusto, as if he hadn't just shattered a human being across the table. I stared at the man I had loved. The gray hairs starting to show at his temples, the slight wrinkle between his brows when he chewed, I knew every inch of him. But the soul inside was a stranger. A greedy, shallow stranger. Once the divorce is final tomorrow, I said, my voice gaining a sudden, strange calmness, I'm leaving New York. I'm moving to Oregon. He paused, a piece of steak halfway to his mouth. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of something, regret? Nostalgia? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same arrogant indifference. Oregon? To that old shack your grandmother left you in Willow Creek? Good. Go bury yourself in the woods. It suits you. He didn't ask how I would survive. He didn't wish me luck. He just chewed his steak and went back to texting. Suddenly, his phone rang. A loud, jarring ringtone, some pop song Tiffany probably chose. His face lit up in a way it hadn't for me in years. Hey, babe, he answered, his voice dripping with a sickening sweetness. Yeah, I'm just wrapping up business with the ex. No, it's boring. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Wait for me. He hung up, wiped his mouth with the napkin, and threw it onto his half-eaten steak. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. You're leaving? I asked, stunned. We haven't even finished. I have, he said, looking down at me like I was a stain on the carpet. Tiffany needs me. She's upset about the flower arrangements. He turned to walk away, then stopped. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the bill the waiter had just placed on the table, and tossed it onto my plate. It landed with a soft thud in the peppercorn sauce. You get this, he said with a smirk that chilled my blood. Consider it a wedding gift for me and Tiffany. After all, without you paying the bills all those years, I wouldn't be rich enough to marry her. So, thanks for the stepping stone, Wendy. He turned on his heel and strode out of the restaurant, not looking back once. I sat there, frozen, the laughter and clinking glasses of the other diners fading into a dull roar. The humiliation burned my cheeks. I looked at the bill on my plate, stained with sauce, and then at the empty chair opposite me. I didn't cry. Not yet. Inside the chest of the woman he called tired and history, something snapped. It wasn't a break, it was a release. The shackles of 8 years of ungrateful servitude had just been unlocked. Thank you, I whispered to the empty air. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. I called the waiter over. Box this up, I said, pointing to the expensive steak he hadn't finished. My dog will love it. And bring the card machine. I have a new life to start. The apartment was silent when I returned, a heavy, suffocating silence that pressed against my eardrums. This place, a 2-bedroom unit in downtown Manhattan, was supposed to be our forever home. We had bought it 2 years ago, just when Curtis's company finally started turning a real profit. I remembered the day we got the keys. We had danced in the empty living room to music playing from my phone. I thought we had made it. I thought the hard part was over. Now, standing in the middle of the living room, I realized the hard part had been loving a man who saw me as an appliance, useful until a newer model came along. I grabbed a stack of cardboard boxes and started packing. Not everything. Just my things. The divorce settlement was brutal but simple. He kept the apartment and the company. I got a small lump sum that barely covered my moving expenses and the debts I had incurred on my personal credit cards for household groceries. He had a shark of a lawyer, I had a public defender mentality and a desire to just escape. I opened the closet. His suits took up 3/4 of the space. My clothes were shoved into a small corner on the left. I pulled out my dresses, my sensible work blouses, the worn-out jeans I wore on weekends. As I reached for a hanger, my hand brushed against one of his shirts, a blue Oxford I had bought him for his first big client meeting. I instinctively brought it to my nose. It used to smell like cedar and his cologne, a scent that meant safety. Now? It smelled faintly of a floral, sugary perfume. Her perfume. Tiffany. The scent of betrayal. I threw the shirt on the floor. Then another. Then another. A small pile of blue and white cotton formed at my feet. I wanted to burn them. I wanted to scream until the windows shattered. But I didn't. I had to be practical. I had a train to catch in 48 hours. I moved to the bedroom dresser, opening the bottom drawer where I kept the things that actually mattered. Hidden beneath a stack of winter sweaters was a battered wooden box made of cherry wood. My grandmother, Nana Rose, had given it to me before she passed away 5 years ago. I sat on the floor and ran my fingers over the smooth wood. Nana Rose had been the only person who truly understood me. When I told her I was dropping out of design school to help Curtis, she didn't scold me. She just looked at me with those sharp, intelligent blue eyes and said, "Wendy, give your heart, but never give your soul. And never let a man define your worth." I hadn't listened. I had given my soul, my credit score, and my youth. I opened the box. Inside were old photos, me at graduation, Nana in her rose garden in Oregon, and a few pictures of Curtis and me from the early days. In those photos, I looked hopeful, radiant even. He looked hungry. I saw it now. He wasn't looking at me with love, he was looking at me like a resource. I took the photos of us and ripped them down the middle. One by one. Rip. 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 The sound was satisfying in the quiet room. I tossed the halves with his face into the trash bag destined for the dumpster. I kept the halves with me. I needed to remember the girl I used to be. Also in the box was my old sketchpad. I hadn't touched it in 6 years. I flipped through the pages, intricate designs for ceramic vases, sketches of interior layouts, charcoal drawings of the Oregon coastline. They were good. They were full of life. "You said I didn't have drive," I whispered to the ghost of Curtis in the room. "You were wrong. I just used all my drive to push you up the hill." I packed the wooden box, my clothes, and my toiletries. I left the furniture. I left the expensive espresso machine I had saved for. I left the curtains I had sewn by hand. Those things belonged to this life, to the wife of a successful CEO. They didn't belong to Wendy. By 3 a.m., the apartment looked strange. It was still full of furniture, but it felt completely empty because my spirit had already vacated the premises. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, standing by the window looking out at the city lights. New York. The city of dreams. It had chewed me up and spat me out. But looking at the skyline, I didn't feel defeated anymore. I felt lighter. The weight of trying to be perfect for a man who wanted a trophy was gone. The anxiety of checking bank accounts to see if we could afford rent was gone. The constant, nagging feeling that I wasn't enough was fading. I took a sticky note and a pen. I wrote a message and stuck it to the refrigerator door, right next to the calendar where he had marked wedding tasting in red ink for next week. I took my clothes and my dignity. You can keep the rest. You'll need it to fill the empty space where your conscience should be. Wendy. I placed the keys on the counter. The metal clinked against the granite, a final period at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. I dragged my 2 suitcases to the door. I turned off the lights. Darkness swallowed the luxury apartment. "Goodbye, hell," I said softly. I opened the door and walked out into the hallway, leaving the door unlocked. I didn't care anymore. The family court building in Lower Manhattan was a place where hope went to die, strangled by red tape and fluorescent lighting. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. I sat on a hard wooden bench, smoothing the skirt of my simple beige dress. I wore no makeup. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a woman stripping herself of a false identity. Curtis arrived with his lawyer, a sharp-featured man in a suit that cost more than my grandmother's house. Curtis looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that expensive concealer couldn't hide. Was the vibrant Tiffany keeping him up? Or was the guilt eating him? No, Curtis didn't do guilt. He was probably just stressed about the wedding logistics. He sat at the table opposite me. He didn't acknowledge me. He kept tapping his foot nervously, checking his phone every 30 seconds. "All rise," the bailiff droned. The proceedings were a blur of legal jargon. Irreconcilable differences. Mutual consent. Waiving of spousal support. That last one was the bitter pill. Curtis's lawyer had threatened to drag the divorce out for years, draining what little savings I had if I asked for alimony. I had chosen freedom over money. I just wanted out. "Do you, Wendy Miller, agree to these terms?" the judge asked, peering over her glasses. I looked at Curtis. He was staring at the clock on the wall. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "I agree." "And you, Mr. Stone?" Yes, I agree," Curtis said quickly, almost cutting the judge off. "Can we finalize this now?" The judge frowned at his impatience but stamped the papers. "Decree granted. You are no longer husband and wife." The gavel banged. It was over. Just like that. 8 years of marriage dissolved in 15 minutes. I walked out of the courtroom, feeling a strange mix of hollowness and elation. I was free. But as I stepped into the hallway, I saw Curtis practically sprinting toward the elevator. His phone was already at his ear. "It's done, babe." "Yeah. I'm coming to pick you up for the ultrasound." "Don't worry." He disappeared into the elevator. "That son of a bitch," a voice hissed beside me. I turned to see Deborah, my best friend, standing there with 2 large coffees and a look of murderous rage on her face. Deborah was the opposite of me, loud, brash, and fiercely protective. "Deborah," I sighed, taking the coffee she offered. "It's over. Let him run." "You don't get it, do you?" Deborah steered me toward a quiet corner of the hallway. "You didn't hear what he said? Ultrasound? Wendy, wake up!" I froze. The word echoed in my mind. Ultrasound. "He's not just marrying her for her vibrancy, Wendy," Deborah said, her voice dropping to a serious tone I rarely heard from her. "My cousin works at the reception desk at Dr. Peterson's OBGYN clinic uptown. She saw Curtis and Tiffany come in last week. Tiffany is pregnant. 3 months along." The world tilted slightly on its axis. 3 months. That meant they were trying, or at least reckless, while I was still doing his laundry. While I was still cooking his dinner. "Pregnant?" I whispered. A wave of nausea hit me. "That's why he was in such a rush," Deborah continued, her eyes blazing. "That's why he bullied you into a quick settlement with no alimony. He needed you gone so he could play the respectable family man before she starts showing. He's trying to scrub you out to make room for his new dynasty." I leaned against the cold wall, closing my eyes. I thought I had reached the bottom of the pain, but there was a basement. He hadn't just replaced me, he had started a family behind my back. A family I had wanted with him, but he always said, "Not yet, the company comes first." It was never about the timing, was it? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. It was about the woman. He didn't want kids with me. "Because you were the workhorse," Deborah said, grabbing my shoulders. "She's the show pony. But listen to me, Wendy. Show ponies are expensive." "And Curtis?" "I know for a fact his company's liquidity is shaky. He's leveraging everything to keep up this image." I looked at my best friend. "It doesn't matter, Deb. Let him drown. I'm going to Oregon." Deborah softened. She pulled me into a bone-crushing hug. "You go to Oregon. You heal. You plant that garden. But mark my words, karma has a GPS, and it knows exactly where Curtis lives. You just focus on you. I pulled back and looked at her. He thinks he won, Deb. He thinks he discarded the trash. One man's trash is another man's treasure, Deborah winked, trying to make me smile. Or in this case, one man's trash is actually a diamond he was too stupid to polish. Go get your train. Leave this garbage in New York. I walked out of the courthouse into the blinding midday sun. The revelation of the pregnancy stung, yes. It burned. But it also cauterized the wound. There was no what if left. There was no maybe we could have worked it out. There was only the stark, ugly truth. I hailed a taxi. Penn Station, please, I told the driver. As the cab merged into traffic, I took my phone out of my purse. I opened the contacts, found husband, no, Curtis, and hit delete. Then, I popped the back of the phone open, took out the SIM card, and snapped it in half. I rolled down the window and tossed the pieces onto the asphalt of 8th Avenue. Goodbye, New York, I whispered. And good luck, Tiffany. You're going to need it. The Amtrak train chugged rhythmically, a soothing metallic lullaby that helped drown out the chaotic noise in my head. Clack clack, whoosh. Clack clack, whoosh. I had been staring out the window for hours, watching the gray, concrete sprawl of the East Coast slowly give way to the rolling fields of the Midwest, and eventually, the majestic peaks of the West. I had booked a sleeper car. It was an extravagance I couldn't really afford, but I needed the privacy. I couldn't sit in coach, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, pretending I wasn't a woman fleeing the wreckage of her life. Day 2 on the train. The landscape outside was vast and empty. It matched how I felt inside. Empty, but spacious. There was room to breathe now. I pulled Nana Rose's battered copy of Pride and Prejudice from my bag, but I couldn't focus on the words. Instead, my mind kept drifting back to the look on Curtis's face when he threw the bill at me. The absolute contempt. How does love turn into that? How does I do turn in to get out? I decided to go to the dining car to get some coffee. The car was half full. I found a small table by the window and sat down. Across the aisle sat an older woman, perhaps in her 70s, with silver hair cut in a chic bob and bright, observant eyes. She was knitting something that looked like a chaotic explosion of colors. She caught me staring and smiled. It's a scarf, she said, her voice raspy and warm. Or a blanket. It hasn't decided what it wants to be yet. I'm just letting it happen. I smiled back, a genuine smile for the first time in days. That sounds like a good philosophy. I'm Martha, she said. You look like you're running away from something, or running toward something. Which is it? I hesitated. I usually didn't talk to strangers. But I had no SIM card, no husband, and no home. What did I have to lose? Running away, I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warm coffee cup. My husband, ex-husband, traded me in for a newer model. And a baby. Martha stopped knitting. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Ah. The midlife crisis upgrade. Classic. Painful, but classic. He said I was tired, I said, the words tumbling out. He said I smelled like struggle. I worked 2 jobs to build his company, and now he's marrying his secretary and living the life I paid for. Martha nodded, her needles clicking softly again. Honey, listen to me. Men like that? They are like parasites. They attach, they drain, and when the host is dry, they move on. But here's the thing about the host, once the parasite is gone, the host recovers. The parasite? It eventually starves if it doesn't find another victim. He found one, I said bitterly. She's 24. She's not a victim yet, Martha corrected. She's just the next meal. Give it time. She leaned forward. Where are you going? Oregon. Willow Creek. My grandmother left me an old stone house there. I haven't been back in years. Oregon, Martha sighed dreamily. Big trees. Clean air. Good soil. That's a place to grow roots, not just park a car. You take that house, and you make it yours. You strip the wallpaper. You paint the walls a color you like, not a color he would approve of. You reclaim your space. I'm scared, I confessed. I'm 32, I have no job, no husband, and barely any money. I feel like I've failed. Martha laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Failed? You survived. You didn't fail, you escaped. You think winning is staying with a man who disrespects you? That's losing, dear. Walking away with your head high? That's the victory. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped chocolate. She slid it across the table to me. Eat this. Chocolate helps. And remember, sometimes the train has to go through a long, dark tunnel before it hits the coast. You're just in the tunnel right now. But I promise you, the ocean is waiting. I ate the chocolate. It was dark and bittersweet. The train whistled, a lonely sound in the night. I went back to my cabin, Martha's words echoing in my mind. You didn't fail, you escaped. I lay in the narrow bunk, watching the moon race alongside the train. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine the future not as a terrifying void, but as a blank canvas. The next morning, the scenery changed. The flat plains rose into jagged mountains covered in pine trees. The air that seeped through the ventilation felt cooler, crisper. We were crossing the border into Oregon. My heart started to race, not with anxiety, but with anticipation. The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom. Next stop, Willow Creek. Willow Creek, coming up. I gathered my bags. I checked my reflection in the small mirror. I looked tired, yes. Pale. But my eyes were clear. The dull resignation was gone. The train hissed to a halt. I stepped onto the platform. The air hit me instantly, it smelled of damp earth, pine needles, and rain. It was pure. It was clean. It didn't smell like betrayal. I dragged my suitcases to the edge of the platform and looked out at the small town nestled in the valley. It looked like a painting. I'm home, Nana, I whispered to the wind. I'm finally home. The taxi driver, a chatty man named Pete with a thick flannel shirt, dropped me off at the end of the long, graveled driveway. Ain't nobody lived at the Rose place for a long time, he commented, eyeing the overgrown ivy climbing the stone walls. Shame. Used to be the prettiest garden in the county. It will be again, I said, handing him the cash. It was a promise to myself as much as to him. I stood before the house. It was a sturdy two-story cottage made of gray river stone, with a slate roof and a wide wooden porch. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, but a fairy tale that had been paused for 5 years. Weeds choked the rose bushes. The blue paint on the shutters was peeling. A shutter hung crookedly from one hinge, banging softly in the breeze. But it was mine. It was the only thing in the world that was truly mine. I found the spare key exactly where Nana always hid it, under the third terracotta pot to the left of the door. The lock was stiff, but with a hard jiggle, the heavy oak door creaked open. I stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight cutting through the gloom. The air smelled musty, mixed with the faint, lingering scent of Nana's lavender potpourri. Furniture was covered in white sheets, looking like ghosts waiting for a party. I pulled the sheet off the nearest armchair, Nana's favorite wingback chair by the fireplace. A cloud of dust puffed up, making me cough. Okay, I said aloud. First things first. Windows. I spent the next 3 hours opening every window, letting the fresh Oregon breeze sweep out the stale air of abandonment. I swept the floors, wiped down the kitchen counters, and made up the bed in the guest room. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in Nana's room yet. By evening, my muscles ached, but it was a good ache. It was the ache of accomplishment. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of instant tea, looking around the room. This kitchen. I remembered baking cookies here with Nana. I remembered sitting at this table crying over a boy in high school, and Nana telling me, "Boys are like buses, Wendy. Another one comes every 15 minutes. But your education? That's yours forever." I had disappointed her by dropping out. The guilt pricked at me. I noticed a stack of mail on the counter, accumulated by the property management company I had hired to do bare minimum checks over the years. Mostly junk mail, flyers, and bills I had set to autopay. But at the bottom of the stack was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't postmarked. It had my name, Wendy Miller, handwritten in elegant cursive ink. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It wasn't Nana's. It was Mr. Higgins, her old lawyer and lifelong friend. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, dated 5 years ago, the week Nana died. Dear Wendy, if you are reading this, 2 things have happened. First, I have passed on. Second, you have finally returned to Willow Creek alone. My hands started to tremble. How did she know? I know you loved that boy, Curtis. But I have lived 80 years, my dear, and I know a wolf when I see one. He has hungry eyes, but not for you. For what you can give him. I wanted to leave you everything immediately. But I knew if I did, he would take it. He would use it to build his dreams and leave you with nothing. So, I created a safety net. A test of time. Enclosed is the contact information for Mr. Higgins. Go see him immediately. There is a trust fund in your name. But the condition of the trust was strict. You could not access a single cent until you turned 40, or until you provided proof of a divorce certificate or a death certificate of your spouse. I prayed you would prove me wrong and have a happy marriage. But if you are reading this, I was right. And if I was right, you are going to need resources to rebuild. Don't be afraid. You are stronger than you think. And now, you will be freer than you ever imagined. Love, Nana Rose. I stared at the letter, tears blurring my vision. She knew. She had seen right through Curtis's charming smile and ambitious talk. She had locked away my inheritance to protect it from him. I looked at the phone number for Higgins and Associates at the bottom of the page. It was 5:30 p.m. The office would be closed. I barely slept that night. The silence of the countryside was filled with the hooting of owls and the rustle of wind in the trees, but my mind was loud with questions. What did she leave me? Was it just enough to fix the roof? Or enough to start over? Whatever it was safe. Curtis hadn't touched it. He didn't even know it existed. For the first time in 8 years, I had a secret. And it felt powerful. The office of Higgins and Associates was located in the town square, sandwiched between a bakery and a hardware store. It looked exactly as it had 20 years ago, brick facade, gold lettering on the glass, and a bell that jingled cheerfully when I pushed the door open. Mr. Higgins was sitting behind a massive oak desk that seemed to swallow the room. He was a small man with tufts of white hair and wire-rimmed glasses, looking very much like a wise owl. When he saw me, his face broke into a gentle smile. Wendy, he said, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. I've been waiting for you. I heard you were back in town. News travels fast, I said nervously, sitting in the leather chair opposite him. In Willow Creek? News travels faster than light, he chuckled. Then his expression turned serious. I assume you found the letter? I nodded and reached into my bag. I pulled out my divorce decree, the paper I had received in the sterile New York courtroom just 3 days ago. I placed it on the desk. Nana. Nana said I needed this. Mr. Higgins adjusted his glasses and examined the document carefully. Signed, sealed, and finalized. I'm sorry for your pain, Wendy. But I am glad for your timing. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick leather binder. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman, Wendy. Most people knew her as the lady with the prize-winning roses. Very few knew she was one of the shrewdest stock market investors on the West Coast. My jaw dropped slightly. Nana? Invested? Since the 70s, Higgins nodded. She bought land when it was cheap. She bought tech stocks when people thought computers were a fad. She lived simply because she liked simple things, not because she had to. He opened the binder and turned it toward me. This is the Rose Miller Trust. As of this morning's market opening, the total value of the assets, including the house, the diversified stock portfolio, and the cash reserves, is... He pointed to a figure at the bottom of the page. I looked. I blinked. I looked again. $5,240,000. The air left my lungs. The room started to spin. $5 million. $5 million. This is a mistake, I stammered. Nana sold jams at the county fair. And she put every dollar of profit into Berkshire Hathaway, Higgins smiled. It's all yours, Wendy. The conditions of the trust have been met. You are divorced. The wolf is gone from the door. The assets are now fully under your control. I sat back, stunned. For 8 years, I had clipped coupons. I had walked 20 blocks to save bus fare. I had let Curtis scream at me because I bought the expensive brand of coffee. I had lived in a constant state of financial anxiety, feeling like a burden, feeling like a beggar in my own marriage. And all this time, I was a millionaire. Does he know? I whispered. Does Curtis know? Absolutely not, Higgins said firmly. The trust was structured specifically to be invisible. Since you acquired it after the divorce was finalized, technically, the trigger event was the divorce, it is not marital property. He has no claim to a single cent. It's yours, Wendy. Clean and clear. A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It started as a giggle and turned into a full-bellied laugh, tears streaming down my face. It was hysterical, liberating, and slightly manic. Are you okay? Higgins asked kindly, sliding a box of tissues across the desk. I'm fine, I wiped my eyes. I'm just thinking about, he left me because he thought I was poor. He left me because he thought I couldn't help him finance his lifestyle anymore. He threw a restaurant bill at me, Mr. Higgins. He threw a $100 bill at me and told me to pay it. Well, Higgins leaned back. Now you can buy the restaurant if you want. No, I said, sitting up straighter. A new clarity washed over me. I don't want to buy a restaurant. And I don't want anyone to know about this. Not yet. Discretion is wise, Higgins agreed. In a small town, money attracts flies. I want to live in Nana's house, I said, my mind racing. I want to fix it up myself. I want to get a job. I want to live a normal, quiet life. I need to heal, Mr. Higgins. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy healing. I need to do the work. A very mature decision, he nodded approvingly. We will set up a monthly allowance for you from the interest, so you live comfortably but not flashy. The principal will keep growing. I stood up and shook his hand again. I felt different. Walking into this office, I was Wendy the divorcee, the failure. Walking out, I was Wendy the heiress. But more importantly, I was Wendy the survivor. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The sun was shining. I looked at my reflection in the bakery window. I looked the same, jeans, t-shirt, messy bun. But I knew the truth. I had the ultimate weapon against Curtis. I was everything he wanted to be, and he had thrown me away. I walked to the hardware store next door. I needed paint. I needed gardening tools. And I bought the expensive brand of gloves. Because I could. The next few months were the most peaceful of my life. I didn't touch the millions. I lived off the modest allowance Mr. Higgins set up, which was still more than I ever had as allowance from Curtis. I threw myself into restoring the house. I scraped layers of ugly wallpaper, revealing beautiful vintage plaster underneath. I sanded the floors until my arms ached and the wood gleamed like honey. I pruned the rose bushes, cutting away the dead wood so the new buds could breathe, a metaphor that wasn't lost on me. I also needed to get out of the house. I didn't want to be a recluse. I walked down to Clay and Fire, the local pottery studio. I had spent so much of my youth in studios like this, before Curtis convinced me that art was a useless hobby. The owner, a cheerful woman named Sarah with clay permanently under her fingernails, hired me on the spot to teach the beginner's will class. "You have the touch," she told me after watching me throw a vase. "You center the clay perfectly. Most people fight it. You move with it." I learned the hard way, I smiled. Fighting gets you nowhere. Teaching the class gave me a purpose. I met the women of Willow Creek, mothers needing a break, retirees wanting a hobby. We laughed, we got messy, we drank tea. I wasn't Curtis's wife here. I was just Wendy, the pottery teacher who made great vases. One Tuesday afternoon, a booming voice echoed in the studio. "I heard there's a new teacher here. Is she any good, or is she just playing with mud?" I turned to see a large man with a white beard and a cowboy hat standing in the doorway. He looked like Santa Claus on vacation. "Uncle Roy." I gasped. Roy wasn't my real uncle. He was an old business partner of Curtis's father, but he had always been the black sheep of that circle because he was honest, loud, and hated pretension. He had moved to Oregon years ago to retire on a ranch. I hadn't seen him in a decade. "Little Wendy." He rushed over and enveloped me in a bear hug that smelled of tobacco and horses. "My God, look at you. What are you doing here?" "I live here now," I said, beaming. "I took over Nana Rose's house." "And Curtis? Where's that stiff-necked husband of yours?" My smile faltered. "We're divorced, Uncle Roy." He found someone else." Roy's face darkened. "That little weasel. I never liked him. Always walked like he had a stick up his, well, you know." "He traded you in?" "For his secretary. She's 24 and pregnant." "Bah." Roy spat on the floor, then apologized to Sarah. "He's an idiot. Always was. Just like his father, chasing glitter and missing the gold." Roy became a regular part of my life. He'd come by the house to help me fix the heavy things, the porch steps, the guttering. We'd sit on the porch drinking iced tea, and he'd tell me stories about the good old days and how fake the New York business crowd was. I didn't tell him about the money. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted him to like me for me, not for the checkbook. And he did. He treated me like a daughter. "You seem happy, kid," he said one evening, watching the sunset over my blooming rose garden. "I am," I realized. "I really am. I don't have much, a lie, but a necessary one, but I have peace." "Peace is expensive," Roy nodded sagely. "Most rich folks I know are miserable. Curtis, for example. I heard through the grapevine he's sweating bullets." "Oh." I tried to sound casual. "Yeah. My old contacts say he's leveraged to the hilt for this wedding. Trying to impress people who don't care. He's building a castle on quicksand." I took a sip of tea, hiding a smile. "Well, I hope he knows how to swim." Living in Willow Creek, getting my hands dirty in the garden and the clay, I felt my soul knitting itself back together. I stopped checking my phone for updates. I stopped having nightmares about Curtis. I was rebuilding my foundation, brick by brick. And unlike Curtis's castle, mine was solid stone. But as Nana's letter said, the wolf has hungry eyes. And even though I was safe, the wolf was out there, getting desperate. The bubble of peace didn't burst, but it was pierced by a ringtone. It was Deborah. "Okay, grab popcorn," she said the moment I answered. "I have the tea, and it is scalding hot." I wiped the clay off my hands and sat on the studio stool. "What's happening? Is the baby born?" "No, still baking." "But the wedding plans?" "It's a circus, Wendy. A literal circus." Deborah laughed, a wicked sound. "So, remember how Curtis was always obsessed with image? Hard to forget. Well, he's trying to land a contract with the Tanaka Group. Big Japanese investors. Apparently, this contract is the only thing keeping his company from sinking. He's been bleeding cash since you left." "Since I left?" I asked. "I wasn't the CFO, Deb. I just managed the household." "Exactly. You managed the household on a shoestring budget so he could reinvest. You managed his stress so he could focus. Without you, he's hiring consultants for everything, eating out every night, and Tiffany? She's spending company money on office decor which strangely looks like nursery furniture. So he's broke? Worse. He's in the red, but he's spending like he's in the black to impress Mr. Tanaka. He invited Tanaka to the wedding. He wants to prove he's a stable, wealthy family man. So, the wedding has to be the event of the century." Deborah took a breath. They rented the grand ballroom at the plaza. They hired a symphony orchestra. And Tiffany, oh God, Wendy. She ordered a custom dress from Paris. $25,000. I gasped. 25,000? Does Curtis even have that? No. That's the best part. Deborah squealed. My cousin at the bank, the one who hates Curtis because he yelled at her once, she told me his credit cards are maxed out. He's taking out payday loans. High interest, shady stuff. He's literally gambling everything on this Tanaka deal going through after the wedding. He's insane, I whispered. He's going to crash. He's desperate, Deborah corrected. And Tiffany is driving the train off the cliff. She threw a fit because the diamonds on her tiara weren't big enough. She's acting like she's marrying a billionaire, and Curtis is too terrified of losing face to tell her he's broke. I looked around my quiet pottery studio. I looked at the vase I had just made, simple, imperfect, but real. The contrast was staggering. Curtis was drowning in a sea of debt and lies, wearing a tuxedo to hide the panic. I was wearing an apron covered in mud, sitting on a fortune, and I had never felt richer. There's more, Deborah said. I got an invite. What? Why? Because my husband, Dave, is still technically a client of Curtis's firm. Curtis needs to pad the guest list to make it look full. He thinks I'm dumb enough to come and bring a gift. Are you going? Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this train wreck for the world. I'm going to go, drink his expensive champagne, and live stream the disaster to you. You need to see this, Wendy. You need to see what you escaped. I don't know, Deb. No, you do. You need closure. You need to see him sweating in his tight suit while his fake world crumbles. It's therapeutic. Oh, and guess who else is invited? Who? Your Uncle Roy. Roy? I sat up straight. He's here in Oregon. We hang out all the time. Well, Curtis invited him. Probably because Roy knows the Tanaka people. He's using everyone, Wendy. He's trying to use Roy to network. I smiled slowly. Uncle Roy. The man who called Curtis a weasel. The man who knew I was happy but didn't know I was rich. And most importantly, the man who couldn't keep a secret after 2 whiskeys. If Roy goes, I said, it's going to be interesting. Tell him to go. Deborah urged. Tell him to go and represent the Team Wendy delegation. That night, I invited Uncle Roy over for dinner. I made roast chicken and opened a bottle of wine. So, I said casually, I heard you got an invite to a fancy wedding in New York. Roy groaned. Yeah. That weasel Curtis. I tossed it in the trash. You should go, I said, pouring him more wine. Why? I hate the guy. Because, I looked him in the eye. He's trying to scam a Japanese investor. And you know people. You could observe. Plus, I think it would be funny. Roy looked at me, his eyes twinkling. He laughed, a deep belly rumble. You're up to something, little Wendy. But you know what? You're right. I haven't seen a good train wreck in years. And I owe his daddy a favor, maybe stopping him from ruining the family name is that favor. Just promise me one thing, I said. Don't tell him I'm living in Nana's house. Just tell him I'm doing great. That's all. I'll tell him you're the Queen of Sheba if you want, Roy winked. I'll book the ticket tomorrow. I went to bed that night feeling a strange electricity in the air. The stage was set. The actors were taking their places. Curtis was building his house of cards, stacking lie upon lie. And Uncle Roy was blowing into town like a hurricane. I didn't know exactly what would happen. I didn't know about the secret I had kept from Roy would come out. But I knew one thing, Curtis Stone was about to have the worst wedding day in history. And I was going to have a front row seat. Part 9, The Secret Beneath the Dress. Word count, 880 words. The week before the wedding, the air in my pottery studio felt heavy, charged with an electricity that usually precedes a storm. I was glazing a set of mugs when Deborah called. She didn't even say hello. Sit down, Wendy. Put the clay down. You need to be sitting for this. I wiped my hands on my apron and pulled up a stool. Deborah, you're scaring me. Did Curtis hurt someone? No, Deborah's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. But he's being played. And I mean, played like a cheap fiddle. Remember the pregnancy? The 3-month miracle baby that forced the quick divorce? Yeah, the reason I'm in Oregon, I said dryly. It's fake. The silence in the studio was deafening. I blinked, trying to process the words. What do you mean, fake? You said your cousin saw them at the clinic. My cousin saw them in the waiting room, Deborah corrected, her voice trembling with excitement. But listen to this. I have a friend, Sarah, who works in high-end retail. Tiffany went into her boutique yesterday for a final fitting of her reception dress. Sarah was helping her change. Deborah paused for dramatic effect. And? I pressed. And when Tiffany stripped down to her underwear, there was no bump, Wendy. Flat as a board. Sarah said she saw Tiffany pull a silicone prosthetic out of her bag. A strap-on belly. She put it on before putting the dress back on. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, creeping horror. A fake pregnancy. It was the oldest, trashiest trick in the book, the kind of thing you see in soap operas, not real life. She's trapping him, I whispered. She knows he's desperate for an heir, desperate to look like a family man for the Tanaka deal. She's using a piece of silicone to lock down a ring. Exactly, Deborah said. And Sarah heard her talking on the phone in the dressing room. She was bragging to someone, probably her mom. She said, once the ring is on and the papers are signed, I'll just have a tragic miscarriage. He'll be too sad to leave me. My blood ran cold. It was diabolical. To use the death of a non-existent child as an emotional anchor? It was a level of cruelty I couldn't comprehend. Even though I despised Curtis, the thought of him grieving a fake child made me sick. He doesn't know? I asked. He has no clue. He's too busy drowning in debt to notice his fiancée's belly is made of rubber. He's probably so stressed he hasn't touched her in weeks. I walked to the window of the studio, looking out at the peaceful streets of Willow Creek. It felt like a different universe. In New York, Curtis was walking into a trap set by a predator even hungrier than he was. "What are you going to do?" Deborah asked. "Are you going to tell him?" I thought about it. I thought about the way he threw the bill at me. I thought about him calling me old and tired. I thought about the 8 years of my life he had consumed. "No," I said, my voice hardening. "He wanted a shark, Deborah. He got a shark. Let's see if he knows how to swim." "That's my girl," Deborah cheered. "I'll keep the live stream ready. Saturday is going to be a bloodbath." I hung up the phone. I looked at the unfinished mugs on the table. I picked up a carving tool and slashed a deep line into the clay. I wasn't vindictive by nature. Nana Rose raised me to be kind. But she also raised me to respect consequences. Curtis had built his house on a foundation of lies. It was only fitting that the woman he chose was the biggest lie of all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the wedding. The vows. For richer or poorer. They were both lying about the richer part. They were both secretly poorer. It was a marriage of two bankruptcies pretending to be a merger. I went out to the garden in my pajamas. The moon was full, illuminating the roses. I touched a thorny stem. "You reap what you sow, Curtis," I whispered to the night air. "You reap what you sow." Saturday arrived with a gray, drizzle-soaked sky in Oregon, but on my laptop screen, it was a glittering evening in New York City. Deborah had positioned her phone perfectly against a centerpiece on her table, giving me a wide-angle view of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. I sat in my cozy living room, wrapped in a knitted blanket, a cup of tea in one hand and a bowl of popcorn in the other. It felt surreal. I was watching my own funeral, in a way. The funeral of my past life. The venue was obscenely lavish. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars dripped from the ceiling. White roses, thousands of them, covered every surface, creating a suffocating floral jungle. There were ice sculptures of swans. There was a 10-piece string orchestra playing Vivaldi. "It smells like money and desperation in here," Deborah texted me. "The shrimp are cold, but the champagne is flowing." I scanned the guests. I saw old acquaintances, people who used to come to our apartment for potlucks when we were broke. They looked uncomfortable in their rented tuxedos. I saw the Tanaka group, 5 serious-looking Japanese men in impeccable suits, sitting near the front, observing everything with polite detachment. Then, the music swelled. The doors opened. Curtis walked in first. My breath hitched. He looked terrible. From a distance, he was handsome in his bespoke tuxedo. But the camera zoomed in slightly. He was sweating. Profusely. His smile was tight, more of a grimace. His eyes were darting around the room, not with joy, but with panic. He looked like a man waiting for a bomb to go off. He took his place at the altar. Then came Tiffany. She was a vision of excess. The dress was massive, a cloud of tulle and lace encrusted with crystals that caught the light aggressively. She wore a tiara that looked heavy enough to cause a neck injury. And there, under the tight bodice, was the bump. A perfect, rounded curve that she cradled protectively with one hand as she walked down the aisle. "Look at her," I muttered to the screen. "Performance of a lifetime." She reached the altar. Curtis took her hand. I saw him flinch slightly, as if her touch burned. The ceremony was a blur of hollow vows. I, Curtis, take you, Tiffany, to be my wealthy. I mean, wealthy. I mean, wedded wife. I imagined him saying, I, Tiffany, take you, Curtis, to pay off my parents' mortgage. I imagined her replying. They kissed. It was a showy, Hollywood kiss, meant for the cameras, not for the heart. The guests applauded politely. The Tanaka men clapped exactly 3 times each. Then came the reception. This was where the real show began. Deborah moved her phone to follow the action. The head table was elevated on a platform, like a throne room. Curtis and Tiffany sat there, looking down on the peasants. I saw Curtis leaning over to Tiffany, whispering something angry. Tiffany whispered back, smiling a fake, frozen smile for the photographer. Trouble in paradise already? I wondered. Deborah texted, I just walked by the head table. Curtis told her to stop ordering expensive vintage wine because the tab is maxed out. She told him to shut up and smile for the investors. I shook my head. They were trapped in a cage of their own making. Then, the camera panned to the table right next to the Tanaka group. And my heart skipped a beat. There was Uncle Roy. He was wearing a tuxedo that was clearly 20 years old and a size too small. His bow tie was crooked. And in front of him were 3 empty whiskey glasses. Oh no, I whispered. Roy, please don't be drunk. But he was. He was laughing loudly at something the man next to him said. The man next to him was Mr. Henderson, the vice president of the bank that held Curtis's mortgage, and likely, his massive business loans. It was a recipe for disaster. Uncle Roy, the loose cannon. Mr. Henderson, the man holding the debt. And Curtis, the fraud, sitting 10 feet away. I leaned closer to the screen. The speeches were about to start. The best man, a slimy guy named Brad who I never liked, was tapping the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, to the happy couple. Roy didn't stand up for the toast. Instead, he leaned over to Mr. Henderson. I couldn't hear what they were saying yet, but I saw Roy gesturing wildly. I saw him pointing, right at the camera. Right at the phone Deborah was using. Or maybe, he was pointing at the idea of me. My stomach churned. I had told Roy to keep my secret. I had told him not to say anything about the house or the money. But Roy had a lot of whiskey in him and a deep, abiding hatred for Curtis. Please, Roy, I begged the screen. Just eat your cake and stay quiet. But chaos, it seemed, had RSVP'd yes. The clinking of silverware stopped as the speeches dragged on. Curtis looked like he was about to pass out. He kept checking his watch, then looking at the Japanese investors. He needed this night to be perfect. He needed to look like the master of his universe. Deborah's phone was close enough to Uncle Roy's table that I could pick up the audio clearly now. The ambient noise had died down for the toasts. Boring. Uncle Roy stage whispered, loud enough for 3 tables to hear. This guy talks more than a politician. People shushed him. Mr. Henderson, the banker, looked uncomfortable. He tried to ignore Roy, but Roy was in a chatty mood. You know, Roy said, leaning heavily on Henderson's shoulder. I just got back from Oregon. Beautiful country. Real country. Not like this plastic city. Henderson nodded politely. That's nice, sir. Visited an old friend's daughter, Roy continued, his voice booming in a lull between speeches. Little Wendy. You know Wendy? The groom's ex-wife? At the head table, Curtis stiffened. His head snapped toward Roy. Tiffany rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed that her spotlight was being diverted to an ex-wife. I believe I met her once, Henderson stammered, trying to lower the volume. Great girl, Roy shouted. Salt of the earth. And smart. Smarter than this idiot, he jerked a thumb at Curtis. The room went quiet. The best man stopped speaking. All eyes turned to the table where a red-faced man in a tight tux was holding court. Roy, please, Curtis stood up, forcing a laugh. Let's not bore everyone with ancient history. We're here to celebrate the future. Future? Roy scoffed, standing up. He swayed slightly. What future, Curtis? The one you built on credit? A gasp rippled through the room. The Japanese investors exchanged glances. Sit down, Roy, Curtis hissed, his face turning red. Security! I ain't causing trouble. Roy raised his hands innocently. I'm just telling my friend here about Wendy. You know, the girl you tossed out like garbage? Well, turns out, garbage can be gold, Curtis. My heart hammered against my ribs. Roy, don't. Don't say it. I saw her, Roy announced to the room. She's living in Willow Creek. Got a garden full of roses. And she looks happy. Real happy. Not like you, sweating through your cheap suit. I am calling the police, Tiffany shrieked. Get this drunk old man out of here. Wait! Roy yelled. I just want to tell Mr. Banker here the best part. You know Wendy's grandmother? Old Nana Rose? Everyone thought she was just a gardener. Ha! Roy slapped the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Turns out, Roy beamed, looking directly at Curtis, Nana Rose was a genius. She left Wendy a little present. A trust fund. Curtis froze. The anger on his face was replaced by a sudden, sharp confusion. What trust fund? Wendy didn't have a dime. That's what you thought. Roy laughed. That's what everyone thought. But I saw the papers. I saw the house. Wendy is sitting on a mountain, boy. I buried my face in my hands. He was doing it. He was spilling everything. How much? Someone in the crowd whispered. It was human nature. Everyone wanted to know the number. Roy grinned. He held up 5 fingers. 500,000? Curtis asked, a sneer returning to his lip. That's cute. No, you moron, Roy roared. $5 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. The air had been sucked out of the room. $5 million, Roy repeated, savoring the words. Cash and assets. All hers. And you know the kicker? She got access to it the day you divorced her. If you had stayed married, you might have seen a penny. But you dumped her, so she got it all. I watched Curtis. I watched the color drain from his face. It started at his neck and moved up, leaving him looking like a wax figure. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. $5 million. It was more money than his company had ever made. It was enough to save him 10 times over. And he had walked away from it to marry a penniless secretary with a fake belly. You're lying, Curtis whispered, his voice cracking. Wendy is broke. She worked at a diner. She worked at a diner to feed you. Roy yelled. But now? She's the richest woman in Willow Creek. And you? You're marrying, what? That? He pointed at Tiffany. Tiffany stood up, furious. Don't you dare talk about me. I am worth 10 of her. But Curtis wasn't looking at Tiffany anymore. He was staring into space, his mind doing the math. The terrible, agonizing math of his own stupidity. 5 million, he mouthed. He looked sick. He looked like a man who had just realized he had sold a winning lottery ticket for $1. But the show wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because Mr. Henderson, the banker, was looking at Curtis with a very strange expression. He stood up slowly, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Stone," Henderson said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Is this true? Did you divorce a multimillionaire?" "It doesn't matter," Curtis snapped, trying to regain control. "That's her money. I have my own company. I have this deal." He looked desperately at the Japanese investors. "About that," Henderson said, pulling a file from his inner jacket pocket. "Since we are sharing truths tonight." Oh God. Here it comes. The second wave. Mr. Henderson wasn't a cruel man. I remembered him from when we applied for our mortgage years ago. He was by the book, serious, and utterly devoid of humor. Which made what happened next even more devastating. "Mr. Stone," Henderson said, his voice projecting clearly across the silent ballroom. "You asked the bank for an emergency extension on your business loan yesterday. You claimed you had significant personal assets coming into the marriage." Curtis looked like a trapped animal. "This isn't the place, Henderson. We're at a wedding." "A wedding you paid for with a check that bounced this morning," Henderson said calmly. Gasps erupted. The Japanese investors were now whispering furiously among themselves. One of them began gathering his papers. It was a clerical error." Curtis stammered, sweat dripping down his forehead. "I'll transfer the funds on Monday." "There are no funds to transfer, Curtis," Henderson said, dropping the formality. "We audited your accounts. You are overdrawn by $400,000. Your company is insolvent." Tiffany let out a strangled cry. She grabbed Curtis's arm. "What is he talking about? You said you were rich. You said the company was booming." Curtis shook her off. "Shut up, Tiffany. Not now." And, Henderson continued, turning to look at Tiffany with distaste. "Speaking of assets. Miss Miller, or Mrs. Stone, I suppose, came to my branch last week." Tiffany froze. Her hand went instinctively to her diamond necklace. "She made quite a scene," Henderson told the room. "She demanded to know why her fiancé's credit card was declined at the flower shop. She shouted, and I quote, 'I can't believe I have to lend this loser $5,000 of my own money just to pay for the centerpieces. I thought I was marrying a CEO, not a charity case.'" The room erupted. Laughter, shock, whispers. It was a cacophony of humiliation. You told the bank that?" Curtis turned to Tiffany, his eyes bulging. "You called me a loser? Well, you are." Tiffany shrieked, her facade cracking completely. "You're broke. You made me pay for the flowers. You made me pay for the DJ. I thought it was just a temporary cash flow problem. You told me you had millions. I would have had millions if I hadn't met you." Curtis roared, gesturing wildly at the empty air, presumably referencing my lost fortune. "So you lied to me?" Tiffany screamed, stomping her foot. "You tricked me. I wasted my youth on you." "Your youth?" Curtis laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "You're 24. You've known me for 6 months. "Gentlemen," the head of the Japanese delegation stood up. He looked at Curtis with absolute coldness. "We do not do business with clowns. The deal is off." The delegation stood up in unison and marched out of the ballroom. "No! Wait!" Curtis ran after them, tripping over Tiffany's massive train. He scrambled to his knees. "Mr. Tanaka! Please! It's just a misunderstanding. I have the capital. I have. You have nothing, Henderson said, closing his file. The bank will be initiating foreclosure proceedings on your apartment on Monday. Enjoy your cake, Mr. Stone. It's the last thing you'll own. Curtis knelt on the floor, watching the investors leave. His dream was dead. His company was dead. His reputation was incinerated. He turned slowly to look at the head table. At the ruins of his wedding. Uncle Roy was cackling. Best wedding ever. Hey, waiter. More whiskey. But I wasn't laughing. I was watching Curtis's face. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a terrified, hollow realization. He looked directly at the camera, at Deborah's phone, as if he felt my gaze. He knew. In that moment, he knew I was watching. He stood up, shaking. He looked at Tiffany, who was crying, not tears of sadness, but tears of rage. She was checking her phone, probably seeing if she could return the dress. You, Curtis pointed a trembling finger at her. You did this. You and your greed. You pushed me to spend money I didn't have. Me? Tiffany spat. You're the one who wanted to look like a big shot. And now look at you. A broke, pathetic loser. I gave up everything for you. Curtis screamed. I gave up a millionaire wife for you. A millionaire wife you didn't even know was a millionaire. Tiffany mocked him. God, you are stupid. That was the breaking point. The vein in Curtis's forehead looked like it was going to burst. The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted from humiliation to danger. The air crackled with potential violence. Curtis's hands were clenched into fists. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. You called me stupid? Curtis whispered, stepping closer to Tiffany. Yes. Stupid and poor. Tiffany yelled, taking a step back but still defiant. And you know what? I'm done. I'm not sinking with this ship. I'm leaving. You're not going anywhere, Curtis growled. You're my wife. You signed the papers. I'll annul it. Tiffany shouted. Fraud. You defrauded me. I defrauded you? Curtis lunged. He didn't hit her, but he grabbed the massive centerpiece on the head table, a tower of hydrangeas and crystals, and hurled it to the ground. Crash! Glass shattered everywhere. Water soaked the white tablecloth. The guests screamed. Security guards started running toward the stage. You want to talk about fraud? Curtis yelled, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Let's talk about the money you spent. $25,000 for a dress? $10,000 for flowers? You drained me dry, you parasite. I needed to look good. Tiffany screamed back. Unlike your frumpy ex-wife. Don't you dare mention her name. Curtis roared. She was worth 10 of you. She was real. You're just plastic. Plastic tits, plastic nose, plastic soul. And you love it. Tiffany taunted, grabbing a bottle of champagne and brandishing it like a weapon. You left her for this plastic, remember? Because she was old and tired. Well, guess what, Daddy? Now you're old, tired, and broke. The insult hit Curtis like a physical blow. He staggered back. He looked around the room, seeing hundreds of people filming him. Seeing the ruin of his life. And then, his eyes locked on Tiffany's stomach. The baby. The heir. The reason he had rushed everything. At least I have my son, Curtis muttered, almost to himself. We have the baby. We have to make this work for the baby. Tiffany laughed. It was a cruel, screeching sound. The baby? Oh, Curtis. You really are pathetic. She put her hand on her stomach. You think I'd let a loser like you breed with me? Curtis froze. What? The room went deadly silent again. Even Uncle Roy stopped drinking. What did you say? Curtis whispered. I said, Tiffany sneered, there is no baby. This moment right here, the moment Curtis's last shred of hope evaporated, was the peak of the drama. I sat in my living room in Oregon, my tea cold, my heart racing. I watched the realization dawn on him. It was tragic, it was ugly, but it was absolutely necessary. He needed to be broken to understand what he had done. If you are listening to this and feeling that rush of justice, that feeling that karma has finally arrived, please take a second to hit the like button and comment the number 1 below. Let me know you're with me, that you're seeing this justice served. Your support tells me I'm not alone in believing that truth always wins. Comment 1 right now, and let's watch the finale of this disaster. No baby? Curtis's voice was barely audible. Nope, Tiffany popped the P. I needed a ring. You needed an heir. I improvised. You lied? We both lied, honey. It's what we do. Curtis looked at her stomach. Then he looked at her face. The betrayal was total. He had lost his wife, his fortune, his company, and his dignity, all for a lie. He let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a roar of pure, primal agony. You ruined me. He charged at her. Security was too slow. Curtis was fueled by the adrenaline of a man who has lost everything. He didn't punch her, thank God, he didn't punch her, but he grabbed the 7-tier wedding cake that stood between them. With a strength born of madness, he shoved the massive confection. Get away from me! Tiffany screamed, trying to dodge. The cake toppled. Layers of vanilla sponge and buttercream crashed onto Tiffany. She slipped on the icing. Down she went, in a heap of white tulle and frosting. But as she fell, something happened. Something that made the entire room gasp in horror. She tried to grab the tablecloth to break her fall. Her body twisted. And the bump, the round, pregnant belly under her dress, shifted. It didn't just shift. It slid. It moved from her abdomen to her hip. Lying there in the wreckage of the cake, Tiffany looked up, and everyone saw it. Her stomach was lopsided. The silicone pad had dislodged. Oh my God, someone in the front row screamed. It's fake. It's really fake. Curtis stood over her, breathing heavily. His tuxedo was splattered with cake. He stared at the displaced belly. He reached down. Tiffany tried to slap his hand away, screaming, "Don't touch me." But he grabbed the fabric of her dress and yanked. The silicone pad popped out of the neckline, sliding onto the floor with a wet thud. It lay there on the red carpet. A pink, rubbery mound. Curtis stared at it. He looked like he was going to vomit. A pillow, he whispered. I left my wife for a pillow. It's high-grade silicone. Tiffany sobbed, trying to cover herself. It cost $500. $500, Curtis repeated hysterically. And it cost me $5 million. He started to laugh. It was the laugh of a man in a straitjacket. He laughed and kicked the silicone belly. It skittered across the floor and landed at the feet of his mother, who promptly fainted. Get out! Curtis screamed at the guests. Everyone get out! The show is over. The circus is closed. He grabbed a bottle of wine and smashed it against the wall. Red wine sprayed like blood over the white roses. Curtis, stop! His father tried to intervene, but Curtis pushed him away. You! Curtis pointed at Tiffany, who was struggling to stand up in the slippery frosting. You are the devil. And you're a bankrupt loser. Tiffany yelled back, wiping cream from her eyes. I'm suing you. I'm suing you for assault. I'm suing you for emotional distress. Sue me? Curtis spread his arms wide. Take it. Take the debt. Take the foreclosure. Take the shame. It's all yours, honey. Half of nothing is nothing. Security finally reached him. Two burly men grabbed Curtis by the arms. He didn't fight them. He just went limp, hanging there like a broken marionette. Wendy, he suddenly screamed at the ceiling. Wendy! I know you're watching. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen. His apology didn't move me. It wasn't an apology, it was a plea for a lifeboat. Take him out, the hotel manager ordered. As they dragged the groom out of his own wedding, kicking and screaming, dragging his feet through the cake and glass, I felt a strange sense of finality. The monster wasn't scary anymore. He was just a pathetic man being carried out to the trash. Uncle Roy, bless his heart, was the last one on camera. He walked over to the silicone belly lying on the floor. He poked it with his cane. Well, Roy boomed. That's a hell of a party favor. Deborah ended the live stream. I sat in the silence of my Oregon home. The fire in the fireplace cracked softly. It was over. The destruction was total. Deborah called me 20 minutes later. She was breathless. I'm in the parking lot. You are not going to believe this, but it's not over. What's left? I asked, exhausted. He destroyed the cake. She lost her belly. What else is there? The blackmail, Deborah said. I'm hiding behind a van. Listen. She switched to audio only, but the quality was crisp in the night air. I heard high heels clacking angrily on concrete. Then Curtis's voice, hoarse and broken. Just leave, Tiffany. Go back to your parents. My parents? Tiffany's voice was venomous. My parents sold their house to pay for your deposit, you idiot. They have nowhere to go. We are all ruined because of you. Because of me? Curtis sounded incredulous. You lied about the baby. And you lied about the money. That makes us even. I want the ring back, Curtis demanded. Give me the ring. I can sell it. Maybe pay off the catering staff so they don't sue me. The ring? Tiffany laughed. You want this ring? Give it to me, Tiffany. I pawned a real diamond 3 weeks ago, Tiffany spat. This is cubic zirconia. I needed cash to pay the credit card minimums you were ignoring. So good luck selling a piece of glass, Curtis. I gasped. She had pawned the engagement ring. The levels of deceit were staggering. They were like two parasites trying to feed off each other, starving to death in the process. You. Curtis sounded defeated. You are truly evil. I'm a survivor, Tiffany corrected. Now, here is the deal. You are going to sign over your car to me. Right now. It's the only thing you have left that's worth anything. My car? How am I supposed to get home? Walk, Tiffany said. Or ask your rich ex-wife for a ride. Oh wait, she's in Oregon enjoying her millions. Sign the title, Curtis, or I go to the police right now and tell them you hit me in the ballroom. With witnesses, you'll go to jail tonight. You wouldn't. Try me. I have nothing left to lose. I want the Mercedes. There was a long silence. Then the sound of keys jingling. Take it, Curtis whispered. Take it and go to hell. Pleasure doing business with you, hubby. I heard a car door slam, an engine rev, and tires squeal as Tiffany peeled out of the lot. Then, silence. And then, the sound of a grown man sobbing. Deep, racking, ugly sobs. Wendy. I heard him whisper to the empty parking lot. What have I done? What have I done? Deborah came back on the line. Her voice was quiet. He's sitting on the curb, Wendy. He's ripping his tuxedo jacket apart. It's pathetic. Is Roy there? I asked. Yeah, Roy just walked out. He's standing over Curtis. Listen, I heard Roy say. Roy, Curtis sobbed. Help me. Please. I need a loan. Just a bridge loan. I can fix this. Fix this? Roy's voice was hard. Son, you can't fix a pile of ash. You burned it down. Please, for my father's sake. For your father's sake, Roy said, I'm going to give you some advice. Don't call Wendy. Don't go to Oregon. If you go near her, I will personally make sure the IRS looks into those creative taxes you filed in 2018. You know about that? Curtis gasped. I know everything, Roy said. Now, start walking. It's a long way to rock bottom, but I think you just landed. I heard Roy's heavy footsteps walking away. Deborah, I said softly. Go home. It's done. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I said. I'm free. The fallout was swift and brutal. In the age of social media, Curtis's downfall wasn't private, it was a viral spectacle. By Monday morning, #FakeBellyBride and #KickSmashGroom were trending on Twitter. The video of the silicone pad sliding across the floor had 5 million views. Curtis's company didn't just fail, it imploded. The Japanese investors issued a public statement distancing themselves from unprofessional conduct. With no investment and massive debt, the bank moved in like a swarm of locusts. They seized the office equipment, the accounts, and yes, the apartment. I heard from Mr. Higgins that the foreclosure auction on our old apartment happened 2 months later. It sold for below market value to pay off the liens. The place where I had cried, where I had packed my boxes, was now just a line item in a bank ledger. Curtis tried to hide, but you can't hide when you owe money to the wrong people. Deborah told me that the loan sharks he had borrowed from weren't as polite as Mr. Henderson. Curtis was beaten up outside a motel in Queens where he was staying. He ended up with a broken arm and 2 missing teeth. The CEO image was gone. The King of New York was sleeping on his brother's couch in New Jersey, terrified to step outside. I received one email from him. It was sent from a new, generic Gmail address. Subject, Wendy, please. Wendy. I know I messed up. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking. Tiffany manipulated me. She made me crazy. I heard about the trust. I'm happy for you, really. But I'm in trouble, Wendy. Bad trouble. I need $50,000. Just a loan. I'll pay you back with interest. Please. For the 8 years we had. Remember the good times? Love, Curtis. I read it while sitting on my porch, drinking coffee and watching a hummingbird flit around the feeder. Remember the good times? I remembered him throwing the bill at me. I remembered him calling me tired. I remembered the smell of Tiffany's perfume on his shirt. I hit reply. Curtis. I remember everything. That's why the answer is no. Don't contact me again. I blocked the address. Then I called Mr. Higgins and told him to make a donation of $50,000 to a charity that helps women escape domestic abuse and financial control. In honor of Curtis Stone, I told Higgins. He finally did something good. And what of Tiffany? The woman who wanted to be a queen? Her fall was less violent but equally humiliating. The internet is cruel to women, especially gold diggers. She was doxxed. Her social media was flooded with hate comments. She had to delete her Instagram, her TikTok, her entire digital existence, which, for a girl like her, was like cutting off a limb. Her parents, having sold their home to pay for the wedding that became a disaster, were forced to move into a small rental apartment. They blamed her. The neighbors blamed her. She couldn't get a job in any office in New York. Her face was too recognizable as the fake belly bride. Deborah sent me a photo a few months later. It was taken by her cousin at a diner in upstate New York. It was Tiffany. She was wearing a stained uniform, hair pulled back in a messy net, pouring coffee for a trucker. She looked older. The sparkle was gone. Her nails were short and unpolished. She looked tired. She looked exactly how Curtis had described me. Karma, Deborah texted. She wanted a rich husband to take care of her. Now she's serving pancakes for minimum wage. I looked at the photo. I didn't feel happy, exactly. I just felt a sense of balance restoring itself. She had tried to skip the work, to cheat the system, to steal a life she hadn't earned. And the universe had corrected the error. I deleted the photo. I didn't need to keep it. She was just a character in a bad chapter of my book, and I had already turned the page. 6 months later, spring had fully exploded in Willow Creek. My garden was a riot of color. The roses Nana Rose had planted were blooming in shades of crimson, blush, and ivory. I had added lavender, sage, and hydrangeas. The house, once gray and sad, was now painted a warm, creamy yellow with crisp white shutters. I stood in the center of the garden, holding a cup of tea, feeling the morning sun warm my face. I wasn't just a gardener anymore. My pottery class had expanded into a full-time business. I had bought the studio from Sarah when she decided to retire to Florida, using a small fraction of the trust, anonymously, of course. I renamed it the Golden Kiln. I used the profits to start a scholarship fund for girls in the town who wanted to study art or design but couldn't afford it. I was wealthy, yes. But no one in town knew the extent of it. To them, I was just Wendy, the nice lady who made beautiful bowls and always paid for the coffee of the person behind her in line. Uncle Roy came over for Sunday lunch. He looked healthier, too. Spending time with me, having home-cooked meals, seemed to have softened his edges. "You look different, kid," Roy said, chewing on a piece of cornbread. "Different how?" "Lighter," he said. "You used to look like you were carrying a backpack full of bricks. Now? You look like you're floating." "I put the bricks down, Roy," I smiled. "Any news from the idiot?" Roy asked. He refused to say Curtis's name. "Last I heard, he's working at a car dealership in Jersey. Commission only." Roy snorted. Fitting. He always was a salesman. Too bad he sold his soul for a discount. I looked out at the rolling hills of Oregon. I thought about the woman I was on that train, scared, broken, defining herself by who had left her. I realized now that Curtis leaving wasn't a tragedy. It was an eviction notice from a prison I didn't know I was in. If he hadn't left, I would still be in that apartment, ironing his shirts, worrying about money, shrinking myself to fit into his small, shallow world. I would never have found Nana's letter. I would never have found my art. I would never have found me. "You know," I told Roy. "I think I should send him a thank you card." "Don't you dare," Roy growled. "I won't," I laughed. "But in my heart, I thank him. He set me free." I walked over to a particularly beautiful rose bush, a peace rose, yellow edged with pink. I touched the petals. Life is funny. You think you're being buried, but really, you're just being planted. I had been planted in the rich soil of Willow Creek, watered by tears and resilience, and now, finally, I was blooming. I am Wendy Miller. I am a potter. I am a granddaughter. I am a millionaire, shoo. And most importantly, I am happy. The wolf came to the door, huffed and puffed, and blew his own house down. And me? I'm just here, tending my garden, watching the sun rise. If you enjoyed this story of justice and reinvention, please share it with a friend who needs a reminder that the best revenge is a life well lived. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Thank you for listening.